Thanks, Milton. Hi, everybody. So I am a Bay Area tech guy. I'm a computer engineer. A lot of very smart, accomplished people have been up here, so it's a little intimidating, but I'm going to try my best. The point of my talk is just to inform you, convince you that EHR data has kind of shifted from problem into opportunity or solution, the interoperability problems specifically, and the time to start leveraging the capabilities is now. So in terms of a quick intro, the picture up there is myself and my 18-month-old son. He's the product of fertility treatments. He's probably generated more EHR data across multiple systems than I will in a lifetime. So you can see who I am on the left side there. On the right, I did want to mention who is Human API. Really our mission is to make health data more liquid. And what does that mean? It means this paradigm shift towards putting the consumer, the patient, people in the driver's seat of their health data. Practically what we do is we provide the ability for our customers to integrate a user experience into their applications or their systems so that their users can connect their health data by authorizing the sharing of that through their patient portal credentials. So that's what Human API does. And so I'll begin kind of the talk with this statement. And I was curious, I don't think this is a controversial statement, but I'm curious what you all think. Who thinks that's a true statement? Can you put up your hand? Okay. I'm curious to talk to the ones who don't think that's a true statement, because we have certainly a lot of customers that we work with struggle. And everyone I talk to kind of has a story about trying to get at the data that can drive improvements. So, not only is data a problem, but sometimes the experience kind of sucks. I think we've made great advances with telehealth solutions in making it more convenient and effective for people to receive care, but a lot of times people are still starting with no context. Physicians are starting with no context when they're actually working with patients. And I've certainly had that experience. I've moved around from providers a little bit. First telehealth visit through Kaiser. I was trying to rack my brain going, okay, what health history is relevant to try to communicate based on my memory to the physician, and then also think about, okay, and what do I want to talk about today with them? And so that was frustrating to me given what I do and the work that I'm doing, and having that data at hand would have changed that experience. And so why is this? Well, a lot of cases it's because the data isn't available. It's because it's hard to get at the data. So how did we get here? I'm actually going to skip this almost completely because there's smarter, more experienced people that can talk about the history of why this has happened. There's a few hints up on this slide. But the net is that most people believe, and they have the perception, that we're just not in a place right now with interoperability to be able to make a dent in this problem. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about. So help is on the way. This is a question, and I think for me, I believe the answer is kind of, actually. 2018 has been a bit of a tipping point year for EHR data interoperability. The FHIR standards are chugging along really, really well. We've worked with CMS and in the Blue Button integration in pilots that are great. We were really excited when Apple was launching its medical records feature. And there's a lot of great organizations working alongside government to make this a better situation. One thing that maybe eludes a few people is that a lot of this is all really based off of this idea of patient or consumer centricity. A lot of the FHIR work that's being done is based off of this idea of using their credentials to get at the data, whether it's pulling it down to a phone or pulling it into another system. And so I just wanted to really quickly mention why I personally believe that this is absolutely the right approach. These should probably be pretty obvious points, but probably worth mentioning them. They have the most incentive. They have rights to their data. They are the owners of their data. And they do have access to it in a lot of cases already, whether it's through existing patient portals or whether it's through the new FHIR access mechanisms. and they want to be an active participant in their journey. And all signs that we've seen, I think, in the industry are that the more you engage with patients, the better the outcomes. So that's great. That all sounds good. So, what am I going to say about that that's a little controversial? Well, to me, it's that it's a good foundation, but it's not really enough of a solution. Trying to work this problem from the back-end interoperability standpoint is going to take a very, very long time. And yet, when we talk about patient centricity with a lot of our customers, the first question they usually ask is, how can we do this unbeknownst to the patient? And so we really think that that's the wrong way to think about it. Another challenge is that FHIR isn't a silver bullet. It's a standard. It's a mechanism for standardizing data access, but it's not a turnkey solution. And so there's a lot that's still imposed on app developers and people creating solutions. And a lot of them are just too niche. So what would move the needle to propel this forward a lot faster? This idea is around true patient centricity, and again, patients, people, end users, consumers, whatever you want to say. These are kind of the main core principles that I think are really important, and that we at Human API think are important. Data liquidity, so true portability of the data, is one thing that isn't imposed on the app developers or the patients themselves to make sure work. This combination of transparency and control, the ability for them to know exactly what's happening, be able to make choices about their data, and then control that later on if they change their mind. A lot of systems and integrations and approaches aren't really approaching it this way. And simplicity, and to me this means obviously a great user experience, but it also means abstracting a lot of the underlying complexity for the app developers and the folks that are trying to innovate based on the data. So who's doing this well? Well, Apple Health obviously is doing a great job of this. They're blazing a trail. We were really excited when they launched their medical records feature because it really validated our approach. It is within the Apple ecosystem, so there's that limitation, but I mean, what they're doing is pushing things forward to make it easier for the rest of us, so we really think they're doing a great job. And then, obviously I think Human API is doing a good job of this. We kind of started this and pioneered this approach, and if you want to know more about what we do, you can obviously talk to me afterwards, but the difference is really that we do it through a cloud solution that's run on HIPAA-compliant infrastructure, and ultimately it's not limited by certain operating systems or environments. So I'd kind of stop there, and really to close out the talk, I think the main thing that I wanted to touch on is a lot of people think this all sounds great, but then they start to bring up the reasons that they don't think it'll work. And I just wanted to talk about what those things were head on, and some of the data that we've actually seen in recent pilots and I've literally cut and paste some of the charts just so you could see it, to try to debunk some of these myths. So myth number one, not enough patients access their health data or know how to do that. So, industry statistics aside about adoption and the increase in that, we've seen different. We've seen almost in this last pilot specifically, we've seen almost 60% of users who tried to connect their data were successful. So can you imagine in situations where you could be using that data to inform context and aid in decision making, 60% of your patients might be able to provide that. That's a big difference. And then we also have stats here on, it's not that hard in terms of time to do this. People can do this. It's a familiar experience on the internet. Myth number two, it only works for young tech-savvy patients. We've seen, elderly folks who are very engaged with their health be able to handle these situations pretty well, and they also have caregivers who are tech-savvy. So, this bell curve on the left side shows, a pretty regular distribution of people. The oldest person we've had connect their data is 90 years old. So, and then geographically, in some of our pilots, we've been tasked to prove that the data is accessible for people across the United States, and we've been able to do that. Myth number three, patients aren't interested in their health records and wouldn't understand it. Well, if you're not familiar with the Epic CEO Joe Biden exchange, you should look that up because that's interesting. But the spirit of Joe Biden's response in that scenario was, "It's my data. I want to do with it what I want." And Epic, to their credit, have been doing pretty well with FHIR. And then myth number 4 is this idea that patients are incapable of understanding the risks and benefits of sharing their health data. And there's just a few quotes up here that I think kind of show consumers, patients are engaged. They want to be engaged. They want to make informed decisions. It's about putting a good user experience in front of them, and it's a little self-fulfilling. When you put a bad experience in front of them, of course they're confused about what to do. And so we think that's why this patient centricity approach is really important. So to close out, imagine a world where we've talked a lot about the front end and consumers getting access to their data and being able to share it. Imagine a world where, for instance, a VSee platform could have a patient connect their data in advance of a telehealth interview that would actually allow a physician to look at data like this or in whatever form you want and decide, that now they're not starting from scratch. They can figure out, where a patient is in their care journey and go from there. So ultimately, trying to close things out here, I really believe telehealth, it's a native digital platform. It's not encumbered by a lot of the problems that you have with all of the EHR systems to date. People who are using it are already in a digital experience, and so I think it's a great opportunity to start leveraging this data, which is now accessible and usable when you combine a lot of the advances with EHR data in general and true consumer or patient centricity. Thanks. No questions.
Is the right analogy for your product something like a Mint for health data, where you're pulling from different health portals and building into one interface?
We use that analogy a lot. And in fact, the financial industry, 10 years ago is a great analog for where we believe the healthcare industry is today when it comes to the flow and access of that data. So, we think it's going to mature really, really quickly, and we're just trying to make that happen faster. And, again, we're not the only vendors that are doing this. The real point here is just, this stuff's actually available today. You can leverage it today, and you can kind of, by going through a consumer or a patient, you can sidestep a lot of the problems that you would otherwise have trying to do all these back-end integrations.
Question?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So you're probably familiar with Glimpse. That was acquired by Apple. So what sort of the differences that you see with what they did and what you're doing with Human API?
What sort of limits you're saying?
Differences. In terms of what Glimpse's approach was and your approach.
I mean, yeah, all I can say really with confidence is what we see and what we know are available in the data sources that we get at. We were having a conversation earlier where doctor's notes is still not readily available in the large percentage of these systems. We're seeing that change, where as EHR adoption and use and the processes are evolving, then more data is getting in there, and you have advances like voice notes that are being integrated into these systems. That in the end, the data is just going to continue to get richer and more actionable and more complete. And then I think the other point that I didn't get a chance to make is, the other side of this is that patients are going to be now creating their own data a lot more based on all of the devices that they're using, all of the apps they're using, and this idea, like, how do you actually get access to that data? It's actually the same model. Like, you have to go through the consumer in that case, and so, why should EHR data actually be different? I think that's a question that's worth considering.
Great.
Great presentation. I'm a physician. I've had a long interest in clinical research. One of the challenges we have is not only data collection, but the complexities of navigating through an IRB. Mm-hmm. How do you envision a large data pool like this, where you're consolidating data from a lot of different sources, working with a research team who has to, perhaps have an IRB or meet certain standards to be able to publish?
Yeah, I mean, we are working with customers who are using our system and process that are going through the IRB process successfully. I think the one thing to note about the way our system works is we don't allow data to just flow freely based on back-end deals that we make with customers. It's always about making sure the patient is in control of their data and makes those decisions explicitly. So we have reach into something like 250 million lives just because we have all these integrations across the US. It doesn't mean that we have data on 250 million people. It's more about they can connect their data through our system. And then when they do, we offer them the ability to kind of store that data and then take control of it so that they can share it to other places. So it really is riding, very strictly on top of the HIPAA kind of philosophies of making this data exist. Patient drives the process. Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, by the way.
Thanks very much.
I think this is phenomenal building block in there. Can't wait to integrate with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, that's good.
Thank you so much.